So good morning, everyone, and welcome to Decoding Teens today, a Parenting 360 digital panel event. My name is Sakshi, and I'm head of Parenting 360 and a parenting expert. And I'm so glad you're here because this conversation, it is the one we have genuinely been building towards. And I think you're going to leave with things that actually stay with you. Today's session is designed for parents of children, or rather teenagers and tweens aged 12 to 17 years, and whether your teenager is currently thriving or struggling or somewhere beautifully in between, this morning is for you. We are going to go beyond the surface level stuff. No generic advice, no just talk to your teen. We have brought together three extraordinary experts, a pediatrician, a functional nutrition consultant, and a child and adolescent clinical psychologist. And we're going to have some real, warm, honest conversation about what is actually happening with our teenagers and tweens right now. We'll cover everything from what's going on in their bodies and brains to how food and nutrition shapes their mood and focus, and how we show up for them emotionally, especially in a world that, let's be honest, is asking a lot from all of us at the moment. So settle in, maybe grab a coffee, and let's decode teenagers together. And if you're joining us for the first time, a very warm welcome. We are so happy that you are here, and we are here to help you. I'll begin with introducing our experts and our panelists. Our first panelist is someone who has spent nearly 2 decades sitting across from children and teenagers in clinical settings, and who truly understands that so much of what parents observe at home has a biological explanation. She's a specialist pediatrician and a neonatologist at International Modern Hospital here in Dubai, with 17 years of experience and a fellowship in neonatology to her name. Originally from India, she has been practicing in Dubai for the past 12 years and is one of the most trusted voices in pediatric care in this city. Please welcome Dr. Mamta Bothra. Hello, Dr. Mamta. How are you?
I'm good. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation here. Glad to be on your panel. Yes, definitely.
Likewise. Our second panelist is the person I want in my corner every time I open my kitchen cupboard, because she is going to make us see food as so much more than just fuel. Georgia O'Neill is a child and brain developmental nutritional advisor and the founder of Parent Proof Nutrition. With a background in both psychology and nutrition, Georgia works with families right across the UAE to help them understand the very real connection between what their children eat and how they think, feel, and behave. She is practical, she's warm, and she has a way of making nutrition science feel completely accessible. And today she's going to help us understand what is it that is really going on in our teenagers' guts and why it matters so much more than we realize. Welcome, Georgia. Glad to have you
Hi
here.
everyone. Thank you very much for having me, and hopefully we can bring some beneficial insight today for everybody.
We are happy to have you here, and rounding out to our panel is the expert who is going to help us understand what is actually going on inside our teenagers' minds and how we can show up for them in a way that genuinely makes a difference. Dr. Sneha John is a child and an adolescent clinical psychologist based right here in Dubai, currently practicing at Medcare Medical Center in Jumeirah. She holds a doctorate in clinical psychology and has specialized training in child and adolescent mental health, working with children, teens, and families across anxiety, behavioral changes, emotional well-being, and so much more. Her approach combines evidence-based therapies, including CBT and mindfulness, with a deeply compassionate, practical understanding of real-life parenting. She is, in short, exactly who you really want in this conversation to decode the teens' brains. So welcome, Dr. Sneha John. Okay. So before we dive in to our panelists, we'll be moving through this morning section by section. I'll be starting with Dr. Mamta, then Georgia, and then Dr. Sneha. But I want to say this upfront that to all three of you that this is a conversation and not really a clinical conference or a relay race. So if something comes up during the conversation that you may want to add on, please jump in. Your overlapping expertise is exactly what makes a panel like this feel so valuable, and our audience will only benefit from hearing more than one voice on any given point. So please don't hold back and jump in whenever you feel you want to. Dr. Mamta, I want to start with you because I think for a lot of parents in this room, understanding what's happening physically with their teenager is actually the foundation of everything else. right? So I just wanted to ask you that when you look at a teenager sitting across from you in the clinic, what does a truly healthy development between ages 12 and 17 actually look like? And honestly, how often do you see it today?
See, frankly speaking, as soon as any child enters the clinic, a pediatrician's evaluation starts from the moment the child enters the clinic. So, depending upon whether how well the child is built up, whether it is age appropriate pubertal changes are there or not there, child is obese, or child is malnourished, or child how is the hemoglobin level, the pallor is there, or the child is healthy looking child. So that starts from there itself when the child enters the clinic. Of course, how confident the child is, when he can talk to you, when you start conversing, asking about how is he feeling today, whether he's sick or whether he's come for a routine checkup, depending upon how well he can answer the questions or how confident he is looking at you, how well he is also conversing with the parents. When a child comes, it is not only just a physical aspect or the clinical aspect which is important. We have to assess whether child is emotionally healthy, mentally healthy, physically healthy, and whether age appropriate changes are there or whether there is something concerning. And then when we speak to the child, we talk about the habits, whether the child has come for some clinical issues or whether it is like we want to talk about vaccinations or we want to talk about nutrition or some issues, because there are so many body changes, there are so many hormonal changes going on. So evaluation starts from the physical build up till the emotional, mental, and how well the child is doing in the academically.
I also think that during this age, 12 to 17, not a lot of parents actually bring their teenagers or their tweens, because this is the age where they are kind of, they kind of grown up enough to voice out their concerns. The parents are kind of experts in handling the odd flu or two by themselves. And, I don't think there's a lot of influx of patients that you see with 12 and 17-year-olds as in comparison to younger kids. Am I right on that?
Yes, you're definitely right on this aspect. But whenever the children are coming, when I see the kids when they're younger, I keep telling the parents that, a regular checkup for any kid till they are 15, till they are 17, till they are 18, it's very important, because it's not only the illness or the sickness, but we also need to see how is the nutritional build-up of the child, how well the vitamins, or is there any deficiencies, or, are there, as I said, the vaccination, because many times I feel the parents feel vaccinations are only till 5 years of age and after that nothing is needed. So I always keep on repeating in my clinics, in my hospitals, whenever I meet the parents, that there are so many vaccines which are also important when your child is more than 10 years. There is an HPV vaccine, or there is for the DPT booster. So many, there are other aspects also, and you have to meet a pediatrician or seek regular checkup for your child, so that you know that you are on par or you are not lacking behind, your child is getting appropriate attention.
This is exactly why I asked this question, to give a lot of parents like a wake-up call that no, your child still needs to be taken in for a regular checkup. Thank you so much on that. Moving on to puberty and hormones and mood swings. There are parents who often chalk everything up to just hormones. They just say for everything they have this excuse, oh no, they're just hormones. How much of that is actually true, and what are hormones really doing to a teenager's body, their brain, their behavior during these years? Can you show some light on that, please?
Yes, definitely. But because at this age, when there's a pubertal spurt or when the child is into adolescence, hormones do play the most important role. And there is a sudden change in the body, there is sudden change in the mind, there's sudden change of the emotions. So a child, sometimes there is also anxiety with the child. They are sometimes depressed. They are sometimes, clueless what's happening. So hormones are very important. The estrogen for the females, the testosterone for the males, because there's a sudden surge in the body. These will not only bring the bodily changes but also the emotional changes, the mental growth changes, mood swings, anxiety. Everything is okay, provided they are in control. The child can express to you, you can sort it out. But if it is consistent, if it is persistent, if it is leading to difficulty in the day-to-day life or academics, definitely it needs to be addressed immediately. I always tell the parents, it's not because nowadays when the parents come to clinic, they are like, it's with every kid. It is because of the environment. Yes, It is because of the environment, it is with everybody, but the first environment is the house, the home, the family. So bring the family values, sit with your child at least half an hour every day. I know it's very difficult for working parents, but that is what you can give to your child. Doctor can change, the medicines can change, everything can change, but your values, your attention, your time, nobody can replace.
I agree totally. Georgia, I'd like to bring you here. Is there a nutritional dimension to hormonal balance during puberty that parents often completely miss?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm sure parents will probably notice that one day their teenager is eating the whole cupboards, everything out of the cupboard, eating everything they can see. And maybe the next day they're skipping meals. And this also has to do with hormones as well. Um, there's two hormones really which measure our fullness and satiety levels. So that would be ghrelin, which is our hunger hormone, and leptin, which is our satiety hormone. And during puberty, these are completely fluctuating. So that is likely why teenagers do react that way when they're eating. But a really important thing to maintain, which I know that Dr. Batra just said as well, is routine, consistency, and just showing up doing the similar things. And as you say, putting the time in with your kids and really trying to maintain a bit of stability, even if that is just in the home environment, because their hormones are all over the place. And that is the one thing that hopefully we could try and control.
So is there something that we can probably, parents of teenagers or tweens, from a nutritional point of view, can keep in mind to have inculcate in their diets that kind of regulate their hormones or help them with their pubertal growth?
So there's a few hormones that a lot of teenagers are lacking in. So one of the first ones would be, nutrients, that they're lacking in would be iron. And this is particularly prominent in young girls. About 40 to 50% of young girls are actually deficient, in iron, which is likely due to the menstrual cycle. So that's one that is really important to focus on, which comes from food like red meat. Liver is a good one, which everyone probably thinks, how do I get liver in? But there is sneaky ways to get it in. Leafy greens as well. Foods like this. Other nutrients would include calcium. There's a lot of growth during puberty, so to maintain the healthy bones. Omega-3 as well is really great for brain development. Your brain is still developing properly up until the age of 21. So lots of foods, oily fish is great for teenagers at this stage. And vitamin D, which obviously we live in the UAE. You'd think that we have this in bucket loads, which we do. But teenagers do tend to be indoors more, which I think parents would probably agree with. So that's really important to consider as well. That vitamin D is really good for their development.
Apparently, vitamin D is something that, even though we have an abundance here, is not very well absorbed by our body. So is there some kind of foods that you can kind of tell us that help us absorb the vitamin D or can help give like calcium and vitamin D for bone health for teenagers?
Yeah, so vitamin D actually is best. The best source of it is the sun, really, it is. But we can get it from food as well, just not in as high quantities. But in terms of foods, it would be eggs, oily fish. But again, all of these go together. So with everything that happens during puberty and the teenagers, as you say, with the increase in hormones and the stress, the cortisol increases, all of this, having a fully well-rounded nutrition is really puts the children the teenagers in a better position to be dealing with all of these things which will come to face them during teenage years. So yeah, it's all about building the resilience kind of from within to be able to cope with these things.
Thank you. Apart from nutrition, another big thing. Sorry, Dr. Botra, you wanted to add something.
I just wanted to add one thing on this, that I always encourage the kids to decrease the sugar content and also the the fizzy drinks, because lots of girls these days we see many cases of PCODs, and the first thing what we tell them is cut down on your junks, cut down on your sugary items. So whatever is home cooked, whatever is not out of the packet is advisable. Anything which a child is opening a packet and eating, as I tell the parents, please decrease the consumption of that. A healthy or a simple rule to follow: nothing from the
Yeah.
packets, nothing from the Tetra packs, directly what is cooked or directly what is raw, which you make at home. Secondly, vitamin D absorption is not that big an issue here. The getting itself, because though the sunlight is so much, but hardly we go in the sun. The children don't play in the sun. They're just sitting with the tabs or with the mobiles or with their iPods. So that is very important, that you play in the sunlight or you go outdoors and play. Then you'll get enough vitamin D. Get your bodily check done at least once in a year, so that you know it's like a report card of your body.
Right.
How you get the report card from your school, you should get a report card for your body saying how much is your iron level, ferritin level, vitamin D. As Georgia nicely said, that all these are very important for a healthy development and appropriate growth of a child.
Amazing. Yes. And I think, what you mentioned right now, that, anything that does not come out of a packet or a Tetra Pak is the best thing. And I think parents are struggling, especially with the teenagers here, to convince them to not open a packet. So I think, I just feel that these are the kind of rules. So I personally, as a parenting expert, definitely feel that you need to model some things, especially when it's for your teenagers. They, more than instruction takers, they are now into the zone of instruction givers, and they always have this comeback that, but you do the same thing, or you're doing it as well. So I just think that it's very important for the parents, as a family rather, to have these ground rules to limit processed foods or foods coming out from a packet. That is, of course, a concern that a lot of teenage parents are facing. From nutrition, now we're going to be moving on to something which, again, is a big concern for teenage and tweenage parents, which is sleep. So teens are notorious for staying up late. They are sleeping through the mornings. And are those really just bad habits, or is there something biological happening that parents need to understand before they lose their minds over it, Dr. Bothra?
It is biological, because you must have heard the phrase or the term biological clock. Why is it so? Because when we sleep at 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock and wake up at 6 o'clock, the body is working, and even your mind and stress levels are working with the biological clock. Your hormones, the cortisol levels are less, the serotonin is better, your melatonin levels are better. You get deep sleep, you get good sleep, your body is refreshed the next day. Your stress hormones are less. You don't feel very lazy. You are fatigued the next day. Secondly, your working capability will be much more. Your attention span will be much more. Always encourage the child to sleep on time and wake up on time, starting from the early childhood. So all these habits can't be a sudden change at the time of puberty. If you have set a routine very early in a child's life, he or she is bound to will follow it easily, rather than you changing the rules as soon as a child is in the pubertal spurt, or you agree that most of the kids will argue, my friends are doing this, my other parents are letting, why you are not letting? So I always encourage the parents, sit with your child, explain to them, talk to them why it is important. Gradually you will see a change, that yes, the acceptance level has improved and they will listen to you.
I think parents, they are more they want to instruct their kids. And I think teenagers are all about logical explanations. If you give them an explanation, if you sit with them and tell them why they're being told to do something, it kind of has a positive effect on them. So, yeah. Also, what I have recently noticed is that, a lot of health markers, physical health markers, that is, in teens, parents often brush them off like, phases, like, maybe they often say, oh, it's a phase, that they have a headache, or they are like too tired, fatigue, weight shifts, skin changes. As per you, when should they actually be paying closer attention to these so-called phases medically?
Again, the same thing. If it is like, just a small 1 or 2 days, or sometimes it is happening and the child is otherwise concentrating or regular with the academics, regular with the schools, most of the things are regular, but you feel there is a sudden change in everything. The child is not able to concentrate, is suddenly not able to share things, or feeling more shy, timid, or anxious. Definitely you need to sit down, talk it out, whether anything is concerning the child from the health point of view. If any time the child complains of headache, the vision has to be checked, the blood pressure has to be checked, because it's very, very important. And if this is a regular complaint, definitely you need to address and look and meet your pediatrician to see what it is stress related, it is because of the pressure of the academics or some other pressure, because suddenly there's a body image pressure. There's so many things happening in the body. Children will be listening to so many other things. Acne are very common. Some females, they get very bothered by a small acne or a small spurt up on the body. So all those things need to be addressed.
Also, stress is something major, especially in the Middle East right now, with the uncertainty going on and everything. So I just feel that stress, it doesn't just live in our mind, but chronic stress in teenagers physically manifests in the body as well. So how often are you treating symptoms of chronic stress with your patients that you have seen? And do you think that parents are failing to somewhere realize that stress and anxiety are actual root causes of some of the physical ailments that they're complaining of now?
Parents are not failing, but what I as a pediatrician often notice is, there is what the level of communication we expect a parent to be talking to the child, that is not happening. There is a lacking. Parents don't want to talk, or sometimes parents will say the kids are not ready to talk to them. They don't want to sit down. They will just okay, you just have. I always tell the parents, don't just instruct. Listen. There is a phase where you can just keep listening to your child, and when you realize that now he or she is ready to listen to your advice, that is the time you start advising. Don't just argue. Don't just keep on giving the guidance. First, listen the consent. See what your child wants exactly, how much the child understands, what is his level of understanding, and accordingly behave with your child. There are sudden changes, sudden mood spurts. So just don't, every time you don't have to be rude, not rude, but not always correct the child all the times. You have to understand the child's, because they are emotionally not, in the right phase at that moment to understand everything.
Correct. Yeah. Georgia, I'm going to be inviting you here as well, that when a teenager is living under chronic stress, what is that doing to their gut? And does poor nutrition make the physical symptoms of stress worse?
Yeah, so chronic stress can affect a teenager's whole nervous system, really. And as you mentioned, their gut microbiome, which ties into the gut-brain axis, which basically, to explain in simple terms, is a communication really between the brain and the gut. So, for example, if the teenager is stressed, as you said, this would feed to the gut, and that might come in irregular bowel movements, in stomach ache, in inflammation. And then all of that inflammation, that gut microbiome change, directly feeds back to the brain and could cause, again, mood swings, focus changes, and repeatedly stress. And then it becomes this bi-directional loop, basically. And food can sit right in the middle of that. So as you say, if they were eating, ultra-processed foods, I know we mentioned that before, foods low in fiber, high saturated fat, foods which aren't healthy for their gut microbiome, then this really does perpetuate this bi-directional loop, especially if it was in a negative way, as we say, if it was in relation to stress. I mean, as you say, with chronic stress, this, even though they could be, physically safe, their body could still be in a heightened state of stress. So in the fight or flight response could get repeatedly triggered. And as an effect of that, this would affect their sleep, their appetite, their digestion, and their food choices as well would be affected, which also happens in adults, but they may be more likely to grab those sugary, high reward sweets, which then has a negative effect. And again, we go back into this cycle, which causes them to crave more sugar at the end of it, and then back and forth, back and forth. But of course, as an effect of that as well, if they are eating more of these foods as a result of the chronic stress, then they are more likely to be low in these nutrients, which is vital really for them to maintain and cope with the stress. So it's a catch-22 really. It's really the time where they need nutrient dense foods, but incongruently they actually tend to be eating foods which are worse for them to cope with that stress.
Thank you for that. And since we're talking about stress, I mean, for many teens in the UAE, this geopolitical climate that we've been through has made, them into a stress mode on, even if they don't express it that much. How do you, as a pediatrician, support a teenager whose physical symptoms are rooted in something as big and uncontrollable as the world events? And do parents come to you for these things, or I mean, I'm genuinely, I would want to know that, is it just physical symptomatic stuff are the only ones that the parents come to you for, or do they even come to you for stuff like this, that, such stress-related symptoms that have kind of shown up on the body?
Yeah, sorry. What I was saying was, I have not seen high number of parents or too many parents coming with this concern, but most important concern was sleep habits, which had changed because of, the children were having online classes, and, they were also, when there were sudden movements that parents are suddenly going to their home countries. Definitely, they were worried when will be coming, when they will be coming back, how when the safe environment will be there for them. So all these concerns were there. I always told the parents, never negate the questions, never just ignore the questions. Talk to them. They understand. They read from so many like they have so many ways to get the information. So always it's better that you talk to them exactly what's happening, how long it can be there, or what it can impact. So build a confidence to a child that yes, we have got the situation, and now how best we can deal with it. So I guess the children, they adjust very well. They do it very fast, provided we listen to their concerns and talk it out to them. Sleep had, as I mentioned, was very disturbed. Most of the parents were like, they're always on the tabs and they're always on the screen. So late night sleeping, they're not waking up on time. As Georgia mentioned, the bowel movements. Yes, most of the kids, what I encounter here, constipation is one of the commonest symptom I encounter. The reason is not only from the teenage age, but also early childhood, because they've not been taught to use the washrooms regularly at a regular or a fixed time. Parents are like, oh, sometimes bowel movements are in the morning, sometimes at night, sometimes a day later. That's because the body has not been tuned or trained to that it needs to be having a particular schedule. When you wake up, drink plenty of water, or at least a glass full of water, use the washroom, sit in the washroom for some time, clean your bowel, and then you can start your routine. So all these things start from early childhood. Suddenly we tell the teenager, you're not doing this, why acne are breaking up, your face is not clean. That's because the system is not clean also.
Amazing. And yes, please go ahead, Georgia.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, saying something really similar, to be honest, as well, is that, we can't control externally what's happening in this world and what is the adversities that these teenagers are going to face. But I know that I mentioned this earlier, but what we can control is what we do at home, similar to what Dr. Batra said, and how we interact with our teenagers and what environment we create and what we present to them. So, regular meals, they know exactly what to expect at what time, routine. Of course, getting enough protein, enough nutrients that they need. Water, hydration is also really important as well. And as Dr. Batra said as well, supporting sleep. So I know we mentioned this a little bit before, but magnesium is really important for sleep as well, and also stress management. So, that is what we can really try and focus on for the kids, and hopefully, as I say, put them in good stead to be able to cope with whatever life throws at them.
Amazing. Thank you. I think these points are going to come in handy, because I feel that a lot of parents, just because of the behavior that the teens are, displaying, because of whatever reason they don't want to get into the arguments pertaining these things. Dr. Mamta, that brings us to the last set of questions for you, for your segment, which is that for the parent who's sitting at home feeling like they're getting everything wrong, which most of the teenage parents do feel. What's the one thing you wish every parent understood about this phase, for the teenage phase from a medical standpoint? And what would you genuinely change in how the parents show up for their child in this age group?
Yeah, so as I said earlier, also the most important aspect during this phase is communication. Talk to your child, whether it is physical thing which is worrying them, their body image, their acne, their pubertal spurt, their menstruation cycle, how long the duration is, whether it is regular, irregular. All these things definitely needs to be taken into consideration. As a mother, a parent should know what's happening with the child's body, whether the cycles are regular or not, whether the child is age appropriate changes are there or not. First is that. Second is how your child is dealing with these things, taking it positively, whether it is having a negative impact. Symptoms are common, but I always tell it's not the symptom which is more difficult to address. If the symptoms last for very long, it creates an anxiety or it impacts the child in a negative way, definitely they need to be addressed. At least once when your child goes in the pubertal spurt or pubertal phase, go to a pediatrician, see how the body is behaving, whether there is height is appropriate, whether the weight is more or less obese, malnutrition. That is, as I said, important again. Also, you have to talk about substance abuse, alcohol, which I know Dr. Sneha will be addressing, but because in this time all these things are very important. Talk about the vaccinations. Sit to your child, and the last and the most important thing is you are a role model. If you are using the TV and the tab the entire day, and you ask your child that you have to not use it, it's not possible. It's next to impossible. So whatever good habits you want your child to have it, you have to show the same thing.
100%.
So this is very important. Talk to your child. Ask him as soon as he comes from the school or activity. Ask him how was his day, how are his friends feeling. You should know your child's friend. You should know with whom he is going, or going outside or meeting, or all these things. Definitely, as a parent, you should be knowing about your child. There are so many risk-taking behaviors which suddenly can start. You have to talk to them, because right now the body emotions are there, but they don't have the capability to control them, because the
Right.
body is still growing. So you need to take into all these things into consideration and guide your child well. That's all but what is needed. Most important is guidance, be it from the physical or clinical point of view, or a mental or emotional point of view.
That was beautifully put. Thank you so much, Dr. Mamta Botra. I think you've just given so many parents in this room the permission to stop second guessing themselves. And that is such a gift, actually. Now, with everything Dr. Mamta shared about what's happening in the body, brings me beautifully to our next expert. Because once we understand the biology, the next question is, what are we actually feeding this biology? And so, Georgia, I'm coming on to you for this next segment. So let's start with the big picture, because I feel like nutrition is something that parents both overthink and underappreciate at the same time. So, as a functional nutrition consultant working with teenagers, what does a truly nourished adolescent look like, and how far is the average teen from that picture today?
So, a truly nourished adolescent, to use your wording, isn't just a teenager who's eating enough calories every day. It would be a teenager who's getting all of the right nutrients, and you should be able to see this in how they're functioning day to day. So that might be having steady energy throughout the day, being able to focus at school, a relatively stable mood. Of course, these are teenagers, and there is a big influx of hormones, but the right nutrition should be able to make those extreme lows less extreme and those extreme highs less extreme. And also sleeping well. I know we touched on this before, but sleep is really important for teenagers. They do require more sleep at this age, but giving them the right nutrition to ensure that they're in the right position to have this sleep. So not excessive sugar consumption, for example, where they have a huge sugar spike and then a huge sugar dip, which causes irritability, low mood, all of that. And then I know I mentioned this before, but craves so causes cravings for the very thing that made them in that state, which is more sugar. And of course, if the body's continuously doing this throughout the day with energy drinks, sugar drinks, they're not going to be able to sleep properly at night. And how far is a teenager from that picture today? Well, unfortunately, probably quite far, to be honest. Again, I know that we mentioned ultra-processed foods, but during the 80s, there was a huge influx of ultra-processed foods. There was a big shift to convenience with foods. And with that means there's a big move from whole foods. And whole foods is really where we're getting our high nutrient dense foods. And there's actually been studies in the UK which have shown that 2/3 of adolescents, teenagers, diet at the moment is solely ultra-processed foods. So the majority of what they're eating is ultra-processed. So of course, if that's the majority of their consumption, that means that there's huge food groups which are being excluded. Just from a practical point of view, they're not going to have enough space on their plate or the space within their day or within their society to really eat what should be being fed to them. But then also with this as well, because they're not nutrient dense, these type of foods, it leads to more snacking, more meal skipping, and again, becomes part of a cycle. But it is really hard because teenagers are at a stage where they really should be having the most it's one of the most nutritionally important stages, really, in terms of development. It's a very intense stage in terms of brain development, hormone development, all of that. So nutrition should be paramount. But unfortunately, as I say, from a modern teenager at the moment, it seems that the diet is lacking completely, really, from the average.
Yeah. And there's a lot of gut-brain axis, which is getting a lot of buzz, the terminology. Can you break it down simply for parents, and how does what a teenager maybe eats on a Monday directly affects how they feel, think, and behave by Wednesday?
Okay, yeah. So as I said before, a two-way conversation is probably how is best to explain it, and it is bi-directional. So it goes both ways. So if a teenager, what a teenager eats directly affects the gut, and that gut environment directly affects the brain, and that brain affects the gut, and back and so forth. So if a teenager is anxious, for example, I know I said this before, but this can affect the gut in multiple different ways. Bowel movements, all of this, but the gut microbiome is what is really important. And if that's negatively affected, then it does perpetuate in the way that the more things that they eat is not getting, the gut microbiomes aren't being took on as effectively. And this continues. And again, then that makes them more stressed, it makes them more anxious, and then back and forth, back and forth. So in terms of what they would eat on a Monday, how that might affect on a Wednesday, for example. So of course, if they were to eat high sugary foods, as I mentioned before, that would have an almost immediate effect in terms of the boost that they would get, and then the drop that they would get. And as I say, everything that comes with that, like the fatigue, the irritability, all of that could happen on the same day. But if a teenager's diet was consistently low in fiber, for example, high in saturated fats, if we're eating a lot of ultra processed foods, then this does shift the gut environment. And as I say, it can perpetuate. And over a couple of days, that could show up midweek. So the gut microbiome is not really just about one meal. It's about the pattern of food that they're eating and the environment that they're creating over time within their gut.
I agree to that. And I think that this is something that a lot of us caregivers, parents, we often fail to look at the pattern. It's just not about eating healthy one day or 2 days. It's a pattern that carries on. So thank you for touching base at that. And what would you suggest? How can that pattern be achieved in an everyday living setting? As per you, maybe if you have some kind of tips on that.
Yeah. So, as I say, if your teenager presumably will be having breakfast and dinner at home, potentially lunch, well, lunch should be at school, then, as I say, that is in your control, what you're buying in the cupboards and what you're presenting at breakfast.
Right.
Although with that being said, I know that we kind of touched on that teenagers don't like being told what to do too much. They like their autonomy. I mean, I remember from being a teenager myself, I wouldn't want to be told exactly what I need to eat every single day by my parents. I definitely wouldn't. But with that, and I know that you mentioned this as well, Shakshi, that, educating them on the benefits of having this nutrition. I mean, the teenagers especially is a period of high academic expectation. They've got lots of exams, they've got a lot going on. If that is important to them, for example, then you could highlight the importance of how these certain nutrients are feeding the brain that makes them focus while they're in school, that can then help them do better in the exams, or pick up on something else that's really important to them. So say if it is sports or anything like that, and how the food really is fueling them and will put them in the best position for them to excel in whatever is important to them.
I agree 100%. And Dr. Sneha, I'd like you to show some light in this as well. So teenagers who are right now, do you think that there is a relation between how are they feeling emotionally or psychologically is mostly driven by what's happening in their gut? Do you see teenagers whose emotional and behavioral presentations are driven by those factors?
I do see that because the thing is that there's a lot that kind of goes in internally, like in terms of, as George was saying about anxiety, and it's reflected in terms of their eating patterns and also in their gut. So you'd see that, they find it very difficult to, probably one is having like tummy issues, or like even like being able to keep food inside, and having nausea and other kind of you'd say physical symptoms presenting first, then kind of coming into the psychological causes. So I'm working in a hospital setting, so I work in medcare, and so I get to see this presentation first, where they get referred to a GP or like a pediatrician, and it comes through them. So they usually have referrals that, okay, there's some digestive issues. Majority of that's how I get the referral from them. So you'd see like even if it's like a lot of issues keeping the food or even tolerating certain kinds of food, there's that kind of is having a root cause, and it's definitely the body's way of kind of managing the hidden anxiety and stress that this teen is going through. So it is directly related. So yes, definitely.
Okay, great. Which brings me to, Georgia, the next question that, what are the most critical nutrition deficiencies that you're seeing repeatedly in teens today? I know we discussed earlier that iron is important, vitamin D, omega-3, and magnesium. Other than that, do you think there are other deficiencies that we should, as parents, have a look out for? And how do they actually show up in their mood, in their energy, focus, in their behavior?
So I'd say, yeah, probably the five main ones, I would say. Yeah, as you mentioned, iron, vitamin D, omega-3, magnesium, and calcium are probably the main ones. There's also zinc as well, could be in there, but I don't want to flood you with all the nutrients that we could mention. There is a lot. As I say, iron is a really big one. I know that we said this, but definitely in teenage girls as well. So that is a big one. And that is one of the ones that can really show up in a lack of focus, tiredness, then the main symptoms that you would notice with that one. Again, vitamin D, I know we touched on that before, omega-3 mainly for brain development, and calcium is for the bone growth. So these can show in various different ways, but in all likelihood, unless it was, a huge issue, if there was a very, very obvious symptom, it is mainly how all these nutrients interact and overall how the child is feeling. So sometimes it's difficult to pinpoint unless you do have a test done or whatever. But or if you were to work with somebody like me and we do analysis of the diet. But as I mentioned before, it is a combination of all of these working together so that they do have a strong and healthy body and mind to go through the teenage years.
Great. And I know we discussed processed food, but ultra processed food is basically a reality in most teen diets. And beyond generic health warnings, what is it specifically doing to a teenager's gut microbiome? And what does that matter? Why does it matter so much during adolescence? Could you just break it down, simplify to the parents? Because I feel that when we are going to have a conversation with our teenagers about it, we need to give them logical answers. And, so for that, parents need to be, they need to be able to break it down into simplified version. So what is it actually doing to their gut microbiome?
So the whole conversation around ultra processed food, I think recently has had a big influx of interest, potentially mainly down to this book, which is called Ultra Processed People by Tim Spector. I've read it myself. I'd advise anybody to read it. It is really insightful, and potentially for parents to get it if they wanted to read about how it can affect all different aspects of life. But it really did throw it into the public eye, I would say. And overall, the research shows, which is also highlighted in this book, that diets high in ultra-processed food, they reduce the diversity in the gut microbiome, so that the gut becomes a more inflammatory environment, where fewer types of microbes can thrive, which can in turn cause long-term adverse health outcomes. That is the potential for what to happen. But during adolescence, this matters even more because your brain, your immune system, your hormones are all still developing. So when the gut environment is varied and healthy, this can influence a multitude of things, including digestion, energy, mood, and even how the body responds to stress, which, as we know, teenagers are likely to come across in abundance during the teenage years. And vice versa. So if the environment was not healthy, then this would negatively affect how they deal with all of these things. So in short, basically, ultra processed foods don't allow the internal gut environment that teenagers need to thrive during this critical stage of development.
Okay. Yeah, well, that explains a lot. Also, I wanted to ask that a lot of teens are skipping meals. I mean, they're notorious for doing those, skipping meals, surviving on snacks, eating at complete irregular times. What does that do to hormones, to blood sugars? And even, I'm going to come back to, a psychologist as well. But what does it do to the overall gut development and mental development of the teenagers? And how quickly does it show up?
So this can affect their hormones, but it is also caused by hormones, as I briefly mentioned before. So the two hormones which regulate our fullness and our satiety are fluctuating during this time. So, they might eat lots at one point and then they'll skip meals and then they'll snack. And as I mentioned before, or maybe I didn't, the brain is developing during this teenage years quite greatly, and the prefrontal cortex, which is where reward and impulse is controlled, is especially still developing, so undeveloped compared to adults. So that means they're a lot more likely to go for these high reward foods. They want immediate pleasure, they want this high sugary food, and that is what is going to satisfy them at that time. They are biologically more driven to go for those foods at this time, which has an effect, as I say, then on how they're going to be hungry afterwards, how they're going to want to snack again, and how they're going to crave more of these foods. So although that there's a biological driver for the way that they might be behaving in terms of skipping meals and things like this, it doesn't mean that it still can't be managed to an extent. So teenagers, similar to young kids, really benefit from regularity. So when meals are skipped or replaced with constant snacking, this will cause instability in their blood sugar, which again will cause these dips, which will cause fatigue, which will cause moodiness. And again, then they need another sugar hit to get them back to regular level, or so they would think, but it would take them high and too low again. And that can be quite immediate. So as I say, if they were to have a really sugary energy drink or something like that, even even teachers would probably say that they would notice this after break time if the schools were to allow sugary drinks. The behaviour, the focus can all be affected, which again is really important during teenage years. So yeah, the sugar high and the sugar crash should be avoided, which can happen from all of these regular snacks and skipping meals. And over time, it would make them more hungry, less satisfied after meals, and affects how well they sleep, which are all things that we need to try and avoid.
Okay. And stress eating, appetite loss, erratic meal patterns, these are responses that we see in teens during periods of uncertainty too, especially now. So how do you approach nutrition support for a teenager whose relationship with food has been completely disrupted by external anxiety? Do you get such cases? Do you get parents coming to you with this concern?
So yeah, immediate stress can affect the fight. Well, it triggers the fight or flight response, and that is an immediate bodily response. So during that, the brain perceives that they're in stress or a situation of threat, and this would immediately affect the gut. So the blood flow would go away from the stomach, away from digestion, motility changes within the stomach. And that's why you'd see things like stomach ache, nausea, or sudden loss of appetite. So, for example, before an exam, teenager might be really stressed and they feel like they're going to be sick. They can't eat, all of this. And I'm sure we've all experienced this, but that is a natural body response. The issue is if that stress is prolonged, then the body stays in this stressful state, or it's easily triggered back into this stressful state. And again, this has long-term effects on the gut and the appetite and how they deal with that moving forward.
Dr. Sneha, I'd like to bring you in here. So when a teenager's relationship with food breaks down under anxiety, especially in the circumstance that we've been in, is the food behavior a symptom, or can it become its own psychological challenge for you that you've noticed?
Yes, it can, because the thing is that the teen then kind of gets into a pattern, like in terms of how they respond, and that's how then like they are responding to, as George was speaking about, the fight or flight. So that's how they would keep responding to other situations. So like psychologically, they are then kind of they are unknowingly probably even like kind of preparing themselves that each time something happens, they are going to be responding in the same way of I mean, if you see it in terms of the like all of the physical symptoms, that's what you see first, but also like inside the way they think, it would be more so that I'm not okay, I'm not safe, this is a danger for me. They might not be able to say that when they come, but they do have that internally kind of going on.
Right. And so, Georgia, UAE is very diverse. We're very globally connected as a community, and many teenagers have family ties to regions directly impacted by the conflict. So how does that kind of chronic background emotional stress compound nutritional deficiencies, and what would you prioritize addressing first if they have any of those nutritional deficiencies?
So there's potentially a few things that would tie into this. As we've just mentioned, if it was the chronic stress, then that affects the gut and the appetite levels, and as you say, the longer that goes on, then potentially if a child was eating less because of this chronic stress, then that affects the gut microbiome, which then affects how they're thinking within their brain, how they're focusing, how stressed they are, and then back again. And again, as we said before, we can't control these external things which may happen to our children. Of course, we protect them as best we can, but we really can't control certain things. So it's best, which I know that Dr. Bathra before was mentioning, to try and keep our home environment as stable, as safe as we can, keep that open communication with our children, which plays into everything, which is into their psychology, and also how they're eating as well, because of course at the teenage years as well, eating disorders are quite prevalent, especially in young girls, and that can be an effect of external stress and a way to try and control their environment. So it's very important, as I say, to open these communication channels, try and make sure that our teenagers feel that they can speak to us, and hopefully manage it as best as we can.
Okay. And with the hormonal oh, sorry, go ahead, Dr. Putra. Yeah.
And just two things I wanted to add, which I realized that I forgot earlier, which is, one very important thing is your kids, what I noticed, even I think Georgia will be agreeing with me, water intake is very less, very poor. I mean, hardly they drink any water, and most of the parents are complaining. Encourage them that they have to drink enough water, not only to keep them energetic and healthy, but also for their kidneys and intestine, for the body also, it works better. Second is physical activity. As they grow, their focus is more on the academics, more on the schools, and they don't indulge into any sport regularly. I always tell the parent, encourage your child to at least take one sport, play it at least 45 minutes to 1 hour every day. That not only improves your body, but also your mind, your emotional level are totally different when you're playing a sport. So these two things I wanted to add, I forgot.
Amazing. That's a beautiful addition and a very mindful one at that. Georgia, that kind of brings us to the end of your segment. But for a parent who wants to start somewhere today, I mean, of course, not a complete overhaul, but just one or two meaningful shifts where, nutrition based on hormones and that dimension is concerned, what would you tell them to do first?
So I would try and keep it simple, to be honest. First, as we said, is your teenager should be having breakfast at home. Start with breakfast. Let's choose breakfast as the anchor for the day. Try and get in highly nutritious breakfast before you send them off, and potentially they might, be getting snacks and things at school, which you wouldn't approve of. But if you work on that and work on that anchor, then you could add on snacks after that, and try and focus on foods that stabilize their energy throughout the day. And as you say, educate them as well on what is beneficial for their body. I would always say add instead of remove. So potentially if you do have a teenager who is being picky with what they're eating as well, you could include one of the safe foods that they're having at the moment and add on. So add on more vegetable, add on more fruit, instead of removing, basically. Or as we mentioned, they are eating ultra processed foods. Of course, if that is how teenagers are eating right now, they won't be happy, as you said, with a complete overhaul of their diet. These are the foods that they like, that they enjoy, and that's not going to seem positive for them. So if it was to still include small amount of those foods, and then add on some vegetables, add on some fruit, add on some protein, which is going to make that meal better to eat in your gut, and all of that, and the combination of it, instead of just the ultra processed food. So yeah, I would start simple and maintain consistency with it. That's very important as well.
Thank you so much, Georgia. I feel like I'm yet to parent a teen yet, but listening to you talk about really wants me to go home and look back at what's in my fridge. And so thank you for all that information. The gut-brain connection is something that I think a lot of us, of course, knew that it existed, but the way you explained it today makes it feel genuinely actionable. And with all of this, the body, the gut, and the biology, it all lives alongside something equally important, which is what's going on in our teenagers' minds. And this is where Dr. Sneha, I've been looking forward to this part of a conversation. I welcome you to your segment, and I'll just straight away dive into the questions. So the first question is like, when a teenager seems completely to the parents, when a teenager seems to be completely changed overnight, stuff like becoming withdrawn or maybe highly reactive or unrecognizable, what is actually going on psychologically, and why is it so disorienting for the parents or the families?
So, one thing to keep in mind is that usually it's not overnight. There is a lot at play, and it's definitely like in terms of the way that they are coping with all of as one is that the emotional regulation systems is still maturing. Even like in their brains, they're still learning to make decisions, and there is. In terms of a developmental lens, there's a big push for autonomy because they are learning to be their own person. So there's just a lot going on inside of them in this time. So you would see that probably the tipping point is could be anything. Like a big part of it is the sense of belonging. And a social, social world that they're living in, especially in a place like Dubai, where there's a lot of changes, even with the current geopolitical situations. Many families have left Dubai, which have actually caused teens to start over in terms of friendships. And at this time, friendships are a big part of who they are. So you would see possibly some of it is like, with the friends, or it could be something that they're struggling with in terms of the academics, or even like their own body image, which is a big thing as well. So you'd see that there would be a coping, and the coping is usually by withdrawing. So you would see that they either withdraw, or they would overreact, or they would probably like verbally lash out or get very irritable. These are all ways of communicating. So just for to shed that light that it's not it's always a form of rebellion. It's not that they want to rebel, but they actually don't know what is the right way, what's going on inside of them, why are they feeling these things, and hence like it's like an emotional storm inside, and so they use these methods to try to communicate to their family, the most important people, their parents. And that's something that they do probably over time. It might be something that you would see it starts off as an irritability, but then it just becomes like quite difficult then for them to control the way they speak, or even for them to want to socialize, so where they become withdrawn. So it's a pattern. It's something that comes over weeks, and then by the time that they reach that tipping point is when you really see it noticeably.
I love how you said it's not overnight. It has been building on. I think for a lot of parents, it does seem overnight, maybe because they are forgetting to connect the dots or notice those little behavioral changes. What would you say to the parents for this point that you mentioned?
Again, I would say that it's really good to be a bit more vigilant in terms of like how the teen is behaving. Again, not to a point where you overthink it, but just to kind of to notice some things when they converse. Some of the things that they might be just saying it in passing. It might just be an anxious thought that they might be just saying or speaking about in the car after school, even if they say the school was good and that's it, and that's their usual response. It's always good to just kind of have a bit more and to delve in more about that, just to understand like what are some things that they could get out of the teen. Some teens are not very expressive, which is fine, but I think that again, like getting into their interest, getting into their level, and like okay, catching up on where what's going on in their life. I think it would be really good for them to open up. So it will be it's always conversation. So if they are able to just on a daily basis just keep that as a priority, it would just be good just to kind of keep it as, okay, this is what I'm observing, rather than I want to fix it. I just want to observe this, what's happening in my teen. Yeah.
Thank you. And a lot of parents, a lot of families feel that, teenagers seem to feel everything so intensely. They have these intense reactions. And while logic often doesn't land the way parents expect it to, can you just tell us what is happening underneath uh, there with the teenagers here?
Okay, so definitely the hormones are quite active for a teen. So you can say that hormones really do amplify everything. So the logic system is still under construction. So you'd see that they might kind of they might be reactive and like kind of emotionally kind of charged. So it will be really good for the parents to know that the emotional brain. So we've got the emotional brain, we've got a rational brain, and we've also got something like the wise. That's like the one in between. So the emotional brain is the one that jumps up, for the teen every single time when something happens. Again, it depends. There are, like, of course, differences with teens, but then you'd see for the first time they would react and then they would process. So parents can understand that, like, okay, this is them just reacting first, and then they will process that. Possibly, that's for them to know that I wouldn't have to absorb all of that emotion, because it can also kind of be overwhelming for a parent and catch them off guard when the emotions just come all at once. Especially because parents also have a lot to deal with. But it'll be just good to keep in mind that, okay, like there is the logical part is really it's under construction. It's not really what something they're going to be able to rationalize this. Let me just give it a space for them to just say it or show this, but in a way that they are reassured that whatever it is, the parent is there with them to help them through it. It's just for them to even label and say, I know that you're going through an emotional moment, and I just want you to completely be as raw as possible, but I just want you to know that I'm here to support you. I wouldn't probably I'm just here to listen, and I'm here for you. That makes a big world of a difference for them.
Amazing. And the social life for teens here has also taken a hit recently because of fractured school routines and academic struggles that they had with their exams shifting or postpones and everything, all of that. But social life, though the schools have reopened, social life did take a hit because a lot of their friends haven't returned, or they're taking their time to come back to the routines, events cancelled and all of that. So how do you support a teenager who's socially withdrawing or whose peer relationship has been affected? How can we as family or as parents support that,
Okay,
support the teenager?
so one thing would be just to kind of help them to really, like, kind of feel that sense that the family is there around, even though there'll be certain habits that they might have adopted, like withdrawing in a room, being there all day, and things like that, where they probably hardly even come out. They might eat in their rooms and things like that, or glued to screens. But it just kind of a check-in always. It just kind of helps them to know that the family is there, even if it's like the family's going for an outing or board games or whatever it is. They can also be invited, and it's not to kind of even if they say no or I don't want to, it's good to kind of check in with them even before we are planning this, and we just wanted your inputs as well. What do you think? Like, do you want to offer them choices, like, would you want to do this or that? It's always good to just keep preparing them before going for something like an outing or like family night or a games night or a movie night or something, maybe even 2 days before, because again, like, they have already withdrawn, so it's not easy for them probably to just come immediately and then sit with the family. So having a conversation with them, offering them choices, helping them to also kind of feel that, yeah, they are still welcome. They're very much part of the family. How they're behaving doesn't define them. So I think, especially when it comes to siblings, there's other younger siblings who might be watching all this. So sometimes they feel, why is the older sibling behaving like this? Or so I think it could be also worth parents just kind of helping the others to also know that it's not who they are. So that would just help ease the anxiety a lot for the teen who's going through all this. At the same time, if they're open to it, like probably also enrolling in extracurricular activities, as Dr. Bothra was saying. We do have lesser of that happening now with teens. I mean, you'd see a lot of young kids getting enrolled like, from Monday to Friday, probably even the weekends, for so many activities after school. But for the teens, they really want to come home, probably sleep or just be on their devices. That's what I hear on a daily basis. That's what their routine looks like. And that in itself it can really kind of give them, it's a lot of dopamine as well. It's a lot of that they're getting from these, one is from the devices, but also the fact that they are not active, physically active. So it can be something we can suggest as well, like why don't we do it as a family first, like instead of it being, just them going for a class. If they feel that they might feel like, okay, I don't want to go by myself, it can just be something like a brief time. Can be a physical activity, or it can be something else that they can do as a family together, and then maybe it can take it on from there. But a combination of these would be good.
Great. And also, there has been constant, in fact, more so scrolling and
Yeah.
cortisol exposure. So how does it shows in their behavior psychologically? What is the psychological cost that not only the teenagers, but their families are paying for this? Can you shed some light on that, please?
Yes, because they really are under a lot of stress most of the time, even at night, it's difficult for them to wind down. They really find it. I see them saying that, okay, I can't sleep at night, or I need like certain things to go to sleep. Like they need a certain, number of hours on the screens, which really can also affect the family as well, because when they see this, like they feel this teen is like always probably anxious about the worst possible thing, or it can be that they already like, or they're crying, they're teary, or they're just emotionally like even they're breaking down. So the families can also kind of help with I really do love the physical activity part. So if it is possible to encourage those things to kind of release cortisol in a more natural way, that would just help. Again, with the scrolling, I know that teens do have their autonomy with with their devices and how much they use, but it would just be good for parents to also have some psychoeducation given, as well as some limits set on the amount of time, because if it's overexposure, there is a lot that they kind of absorb through these screens and these platforms, which is much more than they can bear. And because they're very, very curious, they would just keep scrolling, and then they would keep it in their mind. And then they would probably just it can even be traumatic sometimes, because they do go through a lot of content which is not appropriate for their age. So yeah, so I think it will be really good for parents to set some limits, and also to be involved in some degree, like what are you watching? Not kind of prying over it, but I think that it'll be really good to have some ideas on that. Yeah.
Amazing. Yes. Yes, Georgia, you wanted to add something on it.
Yeah, just on this dopamine subject. So as you mentioned, the scrolling, of course, they're searching for this big dopamine hit. And as mentioned before, they're highly sensitive to dopamine at this age. So when they are doing that, when they are scrolling, they're getting this dopamine hit, but they're getting less and less satisfied by this dopamine hit, and that also plays into their eating. So the foods where they used to get a high reward from them, they used to get this dopamine hit, they used to be satisfied, these high sugary snacks, they're not getting it anymore. So they tend to eat more of those, or even more sugary foods, or even more, and it all plays into the same thing. So it is actually interesting how one of these behaviors, which of course has adverse effects, as you say, on like the family dynamics and lots of things in terms of their mentality, but then also their eating as well, and they all perpetuate each other, they all accelerate the other one. So yeah, it is really important to try and have a little bit of control over that.
Absolutely. I 100% agree on that. And with that, Yes, Dr.
Sorry.
Pulsar.
For the same thing, also, I always tell my parents of the teens that, it's not a suddenly you can't gain the confidence or you can lose the confidence. It is over a period of time. Always talk to your child. Ask, always give them some responsibility. Let them plan an activity at least once per month. Like, okay, we have to go to this particular restaurant with your friends or with the family. Let them take the responsibility of ordering, and then they will be questioning, Mama, did you like the stuff which I ordered for you, or do you enjoy this food? So it's like, it's both the ways. Sometimes you may not enjoy it all, sometimes you may not like the conversation at all, but not every time you have to correct your child. Develop a habit of listening to your child, gaining the confidence, becoming a friend. Eventually, your child will open up to you for everything they do, for whatever worst happens with them. They will be free to talk to you. Not every time you need to correct them, not every time they have to be perfect or you have to be a perfect parent, but learn or understand the art of listening. That's the most important thing I always, as a pediatrician, I feel. And let them take the responsibility, enjoy with them. Don't just say, oh, we don't know this thing. I will sometimes, I ask my child, oh, you have replied in a small abbreviation, I don't understand, can you teach me all the slangs, so it's like, okay, Mama, you don't know this Gen Z or this, that. So sometimes we come to their level. You always don't have to be very intelligent. Oh, I know the world, I am experienced, I am this, that, whatever. Or share your stories, what you were going through, what happened, how your mother corrected you or how your father corrected you. All those things, definitely all this makes a difference to them.
I totally agree with you. And uh, Dr. Sneha, so that brings me to a next question, which is anxiety. Now, we are seeing a high in anxiety with our teenagers, but there is a very fine line. So, how do you distinguish whether a teen is actually, genuinely anxious or has anxiety issues, or maybe is simply avoidant or restrained? Because I feel that there are two sides of coins for this, because a lot of parents just dismiss their anxiety issues, blaming their age and the phase of life they're in. And some of them are just too, I just feel overprotected, and they just take everything too seriously. So, as a psychologist, how do you differentiate between the two?
So the thing, some of the pointers are, if this anxiety, if you say that it's affecting the quality of life, especially when it comes to one thing is of course, like their appetite, their sleep, going to their school, or like any sort of their even usual, what they consider usually quite normal or fun, and they do not want to do it anymore. And it's over a period of, let's say, you'd see it for like a week or 2 weeks. Even if it's not constant, it's coming up. And it's also the fact that you'd say that that the teen is very much on like high alert when it comes to the way that they're reacting or responding. So you might see a lot of emotional signs, such as they might have like they might be complaining of headaches, they might be complaining of tummy aches or pains, or in different parts of the body. Also, like some of them do cry, some of them do really just they don't know why, but they have these spells where they would start crying a lot. Just even when they're having a good time with the family, they suddenly would cry. And then there's also like just probably preoccupied with thoughts. When the parent is talking, they would just be in some thinking about something else, and that's not how they usually are. And that's like, those are some of the key signs you can actually pick up in school as well. You feel like every day might be a struggle for them to go and come back. They say they're extremely exhausted. Waking up in the morning is not easy. They might find it, even if of course generally they might find it difficult to wake up, but this is like they need a lot of reminders, or they might be kind of sleeping a lot more, or they might be sleeping little at the night. Sometimes, I mean, I've seen this in some cases with bedwetting with teens. I also see that happening for some teens, because that also happens for them. And that's also another sign for me as a psychologist for anxiety. Again, there's other physical causes we can also rule it out with, but I've seen that as well. Yeah, so or like again, like wanting to go frequently to the bathroom. That's another thing, like the bowel movements being more frequent. So if there's anything like that, again, as we're talking about the gut connection, this is something that we can look at in terms of how they are. Another thing is how much time they would be spending on their device. So one is the device is a coping, it's also an escape. And I've actually heard a lot of teens themselves tell me that like it helps me to escape from what I'm thinking in my head when my thoughts get too loud. And so even if you do have seen in the past that they have had like a lot of screen time, usually in a day, maybe 5 or 6 hours, but still it's very continuous and they are not having any sort of break, you can look at it as well as there's something else happening.
Yeah. And Dr. Mamta, for you, are there any physical red flags for these things, like, for anxiety that you kind of, that parents may be coming to you for them, and then you kind of redirecting them to a psychologist?
Yeah, physical red flags. If there is a sudden gain of weight gain or sudden loss of weight loss, this definitely, it can be related to anxiety. And also, if your child's menstrual cycles are irregular, even more than 2.5 years after the puberty has set in, that is also a red flag. Definitely needs to be checked. And if the child is feeling too much tired or fatigued, not able to, sudden loss of grades, or there is a sudden poor performance of academics, definitely. Constant headaches, your child is constantly complaining of headache or not able to fall asleep, or as Georgia said, even tummy pain, constant tummy pains, or they are very common and they can be related to anxiety. So all this, if there are constant symptoms, sometimes which the child didn't have, and suddenly if they are showing, or child is losing weight or gaining, sudden weight gain is there, definitely they need to be addressed.
Thank you. And Dr. Sneha, what does psychology say about parental anxiety transferring to children? How do you think that it is, affecting the children? Because a lot of parents just brush it off. A lot of parents think that it's non-existent, and but it is definitely affecting the kids, especially in the teenage years. So, can you please shed some light upon that?
So this is a very relevant question because the thing is that like your child is a mirror of who you are. And the thing is, whatever age it is, it's not just when they're so young, when they really just mirror or model you, but even when they grow older, they really do model what you do and how you are. Like even if the parent might not be saying or kind of showing certain visible signs of anxiety to them, where a lot of parents say, I'm not really telling them that my stress, but what happens is they really do. They also feel it, and a lot of the times the teen wants to protect the parent. The teen wants to make sure the parent is not going through those things. So they might get angry at the situation, or they might even it might show off as a defiance, or like trying to kind of say why is it that they're so stressed about the finance or their job and things like that, because they can't really control it, they can't really do much to stop how the parents are feeling. So I think that it's a key for every single parent to be able to kind of take care of their own mental health seriously, not just kind of saying, okay, I'm fine, or like if they really are struggling, like if it's really a good idea to reach out for professional support, and to make sure that they really can take on only the things that they are able to take on for themselves. Like they don't have to try to kind of to show that, okay, like it's fine, like dismissing it, because it would become difficult when they're trying to communicate with the teen, and the teen is just talking, but then their response would be that I'm doing so much, like what's the
Yeah.
problem. There would be these conflicts that come, and it's not anybody's fault, or it's nothing to do with like you're not talking properly, but it's just because of the way that they're also under so much of like their nervous system is high alert. They're also going through a lot in terms of fight or flight. So I think that it would be very good also for parents to keep this in mind, that if parents generally have kind of a tendency to be anxious, they have an anxious predisposition, like they're overthinkers, so those things are also good to keep in mind, that that's the way I am. So I just want to also work on myself so it doesn't pass or kind of give another message to the teen.
Absolutely. Georgia, you wanted to add on to something?
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate this subject of modeling, how important it really is, as you say, in terms of having healthy coping mechanisms, I guess, emotionally, but also, as we touched on before, for eating, how if you're telling your teenager to eat X, Y, and Z, of course you should be doing the same as well. You need to practice what you preach, basically. And I'm sure teenagers will pick up on that. If you set the meal and you're having something completely different to them, but you're telling them that they need to have this food because it's good for them, of course they're not going to really take that on board. And years of psychology as well have shown this, that children and teenagers, they do just model their role models, and as I say, that can be shown in many different ways, whether that's how we're coping emotionally, or if we're doing physical exercise, which of course helps physically, and also of course what we put on the table and on our own plates. It's really important.
Right. But I have taken like for me, a takeaway is modeling everything for your child. Like, it has to be a family setup. It has to be modeled via adults to the kids. So yeah, I totally, I totally agree with you. Yes, Dr. Sneha.
I am so sorry. I would have to leave at this point because I have a client that's come and they're waiting. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for inviting me. I hope this was helpful. I mean, in terms of my inputs, but really I've learned a lot from the experts, from just this conversation. It's really important. Thank you so much.
It was lovely having you. Thank you so much for being there with us. And I'm sorry we kept you waiting. We just started a little late, and yeah, sorry for that. And take care. We hope to be, doing something more in future together, for sure.
That would be really good. Yeah, we can do more. I think it's very beneficial for like parents, and just the questions that you've raised as well, the community that you're building. It's so important. So looking forward to more.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank
Looking
you.
forward
Thank
to more
you.
discussions with you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well, actually, that kind of brings us to the end of the session. But is there anything that Dr. Bothra, you or Georgia, would you like to add on to give a message to the parents? Maybe we can do one by one. We can start with Dr. Bothra. I think you are a mother to a teenager, aren't you?
Not teenager. My daughter is now 22.
But you've crossed the age.
Yeah, I have crossed the
Yeah.
age, and I've seen the sudden changes. I have seen 360-degree change in my daughter. The daughter who was always chirpy and talkative and sharing everything, and suddenly she's in a room and not sharing. So that was a phase, but then I understood that you can't just tell your child that come out and talk to me. In fact, you need to go in the room and see what's happening, gain their confidence, then you start the conversation, and then you can get her in the drawing room, rather than just telling her that just come out and be here. And no, it's different. You have to go to their level, talk to them, gain their confidence. And now I think my daughter shares most of the things with me because she feels I'll be there. So this is what I feel, but let's see.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to remind the parents about the HPV vaccine. Most of the parents, they are missing out on those. Check your child's vaccination card. See to it that it's updated. See to it. Even a child who's 10-year-old child needs a vaccination. 15-year also needs vaccination. See to it that they are updated. That's it.
Thank you. That was a very important message because I think a lot of parents are missing on to that. Yeah. Georgia, would you have some words before we end the session?
Yeah, I think, from speaking with all of us during this session, I think there's been a lot of consistency in what we were saying. Routine is really important. Consistency at home in terms of being there for them, meal times, all of that. Actually sitting down together and eating meals is really important. We actually haven't discussed that, but that is really important. That also plays into, having a communication with your children as well, but also the modeling, and also encouraging them to eat and seeing that you're eating healthy things. So really protecting that time, I would say, is really important. Dinner time at night. And just generally, no, you're not alone in it, of course. As Dr. Batra said, a lot of parents will think their child has done a full 360. They might be thinking, here it is, this child, I had this sweet little boy, and now he's, this crazy teenager. But it happens, and as I say, it is due to hormones, it's biological. But, you don't need to be perfect. There's probably no way that you can perfectly parent a teenager. As I say, day to day, the way that they reacted last week to X, Y, and Z might be different to how they feel this week. But just try and remain the stability that they need in their life in all aspects.
Thank you so much. And with that, I want to take a moment to thank all of our three extraordinary panelists this day, Dr. Mamta Bothra, Georgia O'Neill, and Dr. Sneha John. You three have given this community something which is genuinely valuable today. Your generosity with your knowledge and your time means everything. And I know that every parent who's going to be listening to us, listening to this session, would leave with more than what they thought they came with. So thank you for that. And that is exactly why Parenting 360 exists and is built for. So until next time, we keep going, and we look forward to more such amazing associations with both of you. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Shakshi. It was really beneficial. Thank you.